Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happenstance into this Truth Bomb riff. My name is Patrick Lovell. I'm the producer with the $71 trillion truth. And I'm recording this on Thursday morning, February 5th, 2026. Still getting used to the 26, and recording this about 9 a.m. my time. And just a quick one this morning, I hope. I'm going to try to make it as quick as possible. But look, guys, I was triggered this morning. After kind of my daily routine, my morning routine. And I want to set the stage. I want to set the stage in kind of a familiarity sort of context with you guys. You see me here with my hat behind my logo for the Clean New Deal. I got my Van Halen t-shirt on. It's in the morning for me. I'm 57 years old. I'm kind of an outgrown teenager in a lot of ways. And and sometimes my default construct is that as well. I've always been the same dude. I've always been definitely a rock and roller, punk rocker, from the '80s. And because my body is a little bit older, the mechanics of it have to be loosened up in the morning. So I like to listen to, uh, basically my routine recently has been I turn on Apple Music and I turn it to rock and roll, the station, and I just let it play. And I do these morning exercises that I discovered on TikTok, which I love. A bunch of surfers that demonstrate, older surfers, quite frankly, that demonstrate these kind of moves to like create more flexibility and be limber and strength at the same time. And there's a whole, host of these exercises that I've learned about. And I've been trying to do better every morning, and it gets the blood flow going. It gets my body in a really good shape, and I listen to great music, and it really puts me in a great spirit, a great mood because of what I'm in the midst of carrying this boulder of truth that is really the most heavy freaking. I can't even give words to it that would justify it. I mean, I can use all sorts of parallels and metaphors, and we created a T-shirt where I'm like Atlas carrying this big giant boulder of truth up to the top of Everest, and what the proclamation says on the T-shirt is that if millions of us join to push the truth to the apex of the mountain and push it on the other side, we'd destroy the bowling balls of madness, to harken back to my 80s punk rock days. Take the skinheads bowling. It's like take the corrupt bowling. And uh and so yeah, there's a lot of weight on my shoulders, and because of everything that's going on with Trump, the administration, MAGA, the ongoing fascism, the criminality, the absolute lawlessness of this administration, in the light of all things Epstein and more revelations and more revelations. And you just, I hope that there are so many more of you discovering just the kind of being confounded by this notion that, okay, wait a second. If all of this information was held by the Justice Department, that means it was held during the Biden administration and probably before that, which of course it was. And this is the first time things are now coming into public. And I'm absolutely certain that someone within the Department of Justice, and I think this is very important to consider, somebody within the Department of Justice, maybe it was a number of people, who knows, but who chose not to quit, for example, and stayed within the belly of the beast, got the information, and released it. Because it appears that there's so much damning information. I mean, and really over the top, beguiling, disgusting, perverse, like really holy shit information about a whole lot of people, including Trump, right? So you know that uh, if Pam Bondi and the rest of the folks at the Department of Justice were basically, as we know, the FBI was as well, to scrub the files. If their job was to make sure that Trump couldn't at all encounter embarrassment, I mean, that was obviously the plan, or something that could basically hold him accountable, or I guess the whole play is to get the reaction from the MAGAs that have always been about, oh my God, there's this elite pedo ring. And of course, a lot of people on the progressive space are giving kind of credence to what Q was saying back before the 2020 J6 insurrection. And, I mean, I've been saying this stuff the whole time because when you get really inside the sort of the goings on of the intelligence community, there's a lot of really tricky and really messed up stuff that's been going on for a very, very, very long time. Now, of course, long time is always relative, but for those of us who live probably 70, 80 years on Earth, yeah, we're talking that pretty much that time span. But, I just wanted to set the tone for, what I want to introduce to you briefly and comment about a reaction for somebody that reacted to one of my posts on Blue Sky this morning. And when I looked into the person's profile who made this comment, I discovered that they had very few followers or were following few people. I mean, we're talking in the hundreds. But the person seemed like a genuinely good person, a retired teacher, someone who loves the Democratic Party, is anti-MAGA, and someone who really, is one of those people that are very important to whatever comes next in the American people's, press against all of the things that are pressing upon us at the moment. But at the same time, her comment was, you know, I've been around the block a bunch of times, and think I think she said this: anyone who says they've got all the answers and have somewhat of a, let's just call it a Jesus sort of I don't know, view of themselves, some egotistical kind of lens of, I don't know, sociopathy or narcissism or all of these terms that people like to bandy about. And I'm not sure they understand them. I don't fully understand them, but I certainly understand contextually surface, level stuff of those definitions and much more. But, it was a knee jerk reaction, from a meaningful person, a good person, that just had the absolute wrong judgment. For those of you who know me, and many of you do, and this audience is growing, I think I'm up after we just celebrated our 4-year anniversary of these truth bombs. And I'm, like I said at the beginning, I think I'm up to 742 or something to that effect, that pretty much do the same thing over and over and over. What do I do as I address what's happening in the mainstream, what people are talking about, what is trending, and then I, deconstruct it and I backfill it into the information that I was able to aggregate because I'm a producer and an investigative journalist that was fortunate enough to put a deal together where we had millions of dollars of resources that then led me to go on this odyssey that took years and years and years and thousands of hours of effort to get to this point where, like I described to my colleague the other day, and I mean this. Now, I'm going to mix metaphors here because this person, accused me of having a Jesus complex, is what I was trying to say. And I'm going to project a neo complex, which in science fiction is a little bit of a Jesus complex. But and it's funny because where I am is like, um, I do have so many answers, and I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm smart enough, I guess, to a certain degree. I think really, if I have any specific sort of, I don't know, better than average performance, it's in my tenacity and my never give up attitude. But what I discovered a long time ago is this isn't rocket science. This isn't physics. This isn't calculus. This isn't brain surgery. This isn't, aeronautics. This isn't highly complex machinery. This isn't, you know, technology at the level of what obviously society has you know compelled itself to. But it's just racketeering. It's not rocket science. It's racketeering, which is just people and influence and how things work. And through this journey, I've learned the law to a useful degree because I interact with the most incredible legal experts in our country, those that speak truth. And I understand the system and I understand how you put together cases and indictments and trials and so on and so forth to be able to, get the evidence and the whistleblowers and the expert witnesses and so on and so forth to be able to demonstrate to the jury what's going on to render a verdict. That's our legal system. And yeah, it takes time. and it takes effort. Did you hear me just say it took millions of dollars and thousands of hours over a decade of effort to put me in this position that I feel like I'm Neo in the Matrix? Honestly, it was at Revolutions. It was the third episode, right? The third installment where, Neo finally gets inside the Borg at the end. This is after he goes through the whole journey and he basically loses his eyesight, but he sees everything because he can feel it. He sees it. He knows it. He is in the machine. He is the machine. He becomes one with the whole thing. And that's what I've done. That's who I am. And so to mix metaphors and contradict myself while at the same time making the point that I hope those of you who I'm trying to reach can understand is that the reason you want to pay attention to me is not because I'm your savior. And again, to mix metaphors, it's because I'm the deliverer. I literally have the $71 trillion truth. Sounds like I'm a game show host. And that is not faith-based. That is not philosophical. That's not some esoteric concept. This is factual evidence based on this extraordinary odyssey that I've been on. And my colleague at the beginning, described me as Captain Ahab chasing the white whale. And yeah, I guess I caught the white whale to a degree. We'll see how this whole thing ends up. But this at a time period where literally yesterday I did an interview or discussion with Mark Dan, the former AG of the state of Ohio, who's in private practice, but he's encouraging everyone out there to reach out to the Hennepin County Prosecutor in Minnesota, which is where the murders of Renee, Nicole Good, and Alex Pretti took place, and demand indictments. And the way he describes it, of course, is that, well, it can't be part of the chicken shit club, which is a reference to Jesse Eisinger's wonderful book from ProPublica that laid out that, during James Comey's, position at the FBI, at the FBI for James Comey, but he was addressing the DOJ, and he had all of the attorneys raise their hands to show how many cases they lost, because the Department of Justice never loses cases. Or in this case, I think it might have been STNY, but in either case, part of the Justice Department. And nobody raised their hand because they never lose cases, because they didn't take chances on cases that they didn't think they could win. That was 14 years ago, roughly. What we're in the midst of now is an absolute failure of the system. We're in a failed state. We're in a strongman state. We're in a authoritarian state. And if you don't know that, just go ahead and turn this off. But if you do know that and you want to understand how it came to be and how we're going to turn the tables on this, you want to pay attention. And more importantly, you want to like, subscribe, and share and discover everything that I'm giving you, because literally it is what's going to save the United States and the world for good if you're on the side of good. I've always been the side of Jedi. My favorite character of all time is Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And yeah, I hate Nazis. Okay. Hopefully that's enough context for you, in addition to being a rock and roller. But, and a producer and a muckraking journalist and all that goes with it. But it's not about me, okay? I'm not trying to be your dictator. I'm not trying to be anything other than making millions of people aware of what is going on, to turn the tables, to create, the reaction or the what has to happen as a result of this calamity. And I'm actually an optimistic person. And it's like, I think this is the greatest opportunity in the history of what I've been in the midst of, really since my 20s, because this has all been a continuation for me. I've been in the trenches of this forever, not even knowing it. Okay. And I've got 740 plus truth bombs that delve into some of those aspects for those of you who want to go deep. But my colleague, Roseanne Rabbiola-Mille, recently created a meme that I absolutely loved, that captures really the scenario that we're in as we're trying to build a plane in flight at the same time. We're building this mammoth movement behind the facts. It's a revolution of truth to turn the table on the sea of lies. With the Jedis that I'm in contact with for all of the years I put this stuff together. And by the way, these people that I work with, a guy like me who's dressed like this, who's pretty casual because I can be, because, oh yeah, by the way, I do other things, and I'm in the midst of a rock and roll documentary right now, and also some more commercial projects and film. But really, a majority of my time is spent on trying to break through this dystopia to get the truth, because there's nothing bigger, and I've been doing it for 14 years. And again, I'm carrying the $71 trillion truth. Elon Musk might be the first trillionaire, which is absurd. Okay, now multiply that by 71 times. There's 1,000 billion and a trillion. That's what I'm worth. Okay, and again, going back to the just why don't you compare me to Donald Trump in that case, right? Except in this case, it's legit. I'm not a liar. I'm not a liar. I've got all of the evidence, but here's the problem. So many fools out there that just react, or they just get played by the algorithm. They don't do research. They don't think critically. They don't try to check things out. They're conformists mostly, and that's how the algorithm works. And that's what I have seen over and over and over in social media. While I was digging in, getting the facts, doing the evidence, and the hard work of investigative journalism, the entirety of media was collapsing, as we're now seeing. Right? There's mergers and acquisitions. That's been going on for now 20 years. It started really in the late 90s, but it went on overdrive in the early 2000s. And at that time, it was private equity, it was hedge funds, it was a garden variety of financial interests that were literally buying up newspapers and media around the world and country and destroying investigative journalism. That's why I ended up having to do what I did, because I grew up in an era coming out of the 70s. And yeah, I happen to like Hunter S. Thompson and gonzo journalism and many others. But truth was really the most important thing to me. It always has been since my bar mitzvah speech, where I gave, my speech was about truth. I've been living this truth since I was 13, man. And it's like, it's just so absurd to me that so many people are so cowardly or so dense or so know-it-all or so lost in confusion that they just don't understand clarity because they can't get past first base. And if they did, and if that's you on the other side of this, and I'm making the appeal to you, if you want to end this atrocity of lies behind a 5-time bone spur idiot that's got control of our military, that created an ICE force, much of which was illegal, to become a personal military force. Many of these guys, this is part of the bigger plan, by the way. I have a theory that a lot of this is connected through Steve Bannon, and most importantly, in that particular case, the military wing of the private junta forces, which are terrifying right now because they're all young guns that have been raised on Call of Duty, and yeah, they know how to kill people. They know how to kill. It's all a video game, and it really is all a video game now, with drones and other sequences and everything else. Yeah, it's a game. These guys were literally, over a very long time, subjected to this. And I know this because I got a 21-year-old son who's very good at those games. And sometimes he thinks like those cats, and it's a struggle to try to get him on the right side of the force. But I'm working on it, which is like all of you. And I should show you a picture of this AI rendered scene that demonstrates what my journey's been all about. But and by the way, on that note, it was revealed yesterday that Epstein was deeply involved with, I think, seeding a lot of capital for a lot of these gaming scenarios, of which I think led to or were involved with the likes of Call of Duty, which is like, that was my gut. I really thought, is it possible that these guys nefariously created these games to build a force to be able to put all this shit together? And the reason I thought that was possible is because I've seen the movie a million times, right? We all have, especially from my generation. And who's a part of my generation? The likes of Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein. So I always kind of intuitively knew what they were doing, or thought that they did, or at least was reaching. But at the same time, they've revealed a lot of this stuff. And I'm going to demonstrate one of the most important things to you in a moment. And I will say this as well. I'm absolutely convinced Steve Bannon knows exactly who I am. I know Sebastian Gorka, who's in charge of Trump's anti-terrorism, sort of entirety of how they approach this stuff, who came up with the notions of, I don't have the direct correlation to this, but I suspect it's Sebastian Gorka, that the likes of all of us that are Antifa, i.e. anti-fascists, are literally terrorists. They're calling us terrorists, the guys that would be on the side of the GIs against Hitler's Nazi. We're the terrorists. And now I'll tell you how they conflated all that. And I think it's actually kind of brilliant when I think about it. But because I'm Jewish, and I've described this a lot in my past, so I do have that connection with the rabbi of Nazareth. But that's a part of the story as well. But, you know, I've always looked at this, and it's not a laughing matter at all. But I do want to introduce this initially because I think it's so important. Yeah, Israel is all over Epstein. Was Epstein Mossad? A lot of people are talking about Epstein was a free agent working with like Robert Maxwell, betraying the KGB. I just saw yesterday, by the way, and I don't know if this is true. It was coming through the Midas network because of what was taking place in the Epstein files. But there was a claim that by what is his name, Ben. I can't think of his last name. He's kind of like the face of the Midas touch, but he did this scenario where he laid out the information from the Epstein files that Epstein was managing Putin's money. Now that would be incredibly revealing if that's the truth. And a lot of people have speculated for a very long time that Putin's the richest man on earth. And I would believe it. And by the way, because I've been around Hollywood and a lot of people that played with, foreign money, investing in films and that sort of thing. Yeah, the Russians were laundering that money into Hollywood and real estate, and that's Trump. And I could litigate that whole thing, and I have on many occasions. But the idea that Epstein would have been managing money for Putin really creates a very new kind of confluence in my mind. Because the point that I've been making, I wanted to address Israel and Gaza and from my perspective, particularly someone who's supported Israel my whole life and still do. And I want to remind a lot of people that just will immediately judge me on that and, discount me because of that. That there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis of all walks of life, people in the military, doctors, attorneys, accountants, this, that, and the other, engineers, that were protesting Netanyahu, but to the tune of hundreds of thousands. And then October 7th happened. And I could talk about October 7th a lot. I mean, October 7th has a lot of sort of parallels to 9/11 from a standpoint that it's pretty clear that, the Defense Force, the IDF, uh, has incredible technology. And that was one of the most heavily fortified defense locations of the IDF on the wall at Gaza and the entire panoply of the Israeli IDF. And on that particular day, on October 7th, yeah, supposedly forces were, uh, moved to the West Bank for some reason. I can't recall the details. But then, a bunch of guys in paragliders were able to get over the fence, and basically go after initially, which was the most horrifying thing to me, that rave that took place in, boy, what was her name? Nora. I remember seeing those videos of that beautiful Israeli woman who was at that all night solar rave, which is like a peace rave, ultimately carried away by terrorists, Hamas terrorists, and then put into confinement or, tortured and everything else and everything that happened behind the scenes for, like 2 years. And she was finally released, thank God. But so many others had died. And, it wasn't much longer after, I believe, recently, relatively recently, right, that, we dropped some Moab missiles, I guess, on nuclear installations in Iran, and they responded with, I think 1,200 missiles that got bounced out by Israelis' Iron Dome. So again, to compare and contrast, a bunch of people on paragliders got over the most heavily fortified wall to invade Israel on October 7th. That then later Israel demonstrated they could repel, I don't know, 1,200 missiles. And then ultimately, nobody's asking questions, even though the New York Times did put a front page piece together that showed that the Israelis had warnings for well over a year. And so the question is, what am I saying exactly? Am I saying that Netanyahu let this happen to be able to justify an overwhelming response. Why would he do that? And again, I've been deeply ensconced in Israeli goings-ons going back to the 80s. I know about all of the different, battles, wars, this, that, and the other that have taken place during the entire time. And I've seen progressively that the IDF has become more and more genius at being able to sabotage through technology and other means all of what their enemies are playing ball with in a way that it just mopped the floor with their enemies. Now, interestingly enough, some of the more difficult things to kind of pry back are this relationship with UAE, how UAE is funding Hamas, how UAE is simultaneously deeply ensconced with Trump. It was just revealed yesterday through Senator Chris Murphy that UAE paid, I think, 137 million directly to the Trump family with a deal for 2 billion as it relates to, here's Liberty Financial, but AI and secrets. And, we also know that Qatar, provided the 747. And is it UAE or Qatar that's going to get a private airbase? I think it's UAE. Maybe it's Qatar. It's probably UAE in Idaho. I mean, the entanglement of the privatized scenario for billionaires is out of control. Okay. And they're all in this madness as, as demonstrated, I wanted to say emboldened, maybe emblematic is the word I was looking for, by all of these details that are revealed in the Epstein files since the Friday $3 million dump, right? And it gets more and more intense every step of the way. And I'm absolutely convinced, again, going back to my previous point, that somebody within DOJ that didn't quit, or resign or whatever, because of how insane the DOJ is right now, just purely filled to toxic brew of corruption, right? And Todd Blanche was a name I was thinking of before. Todd Blanche was out front introducing the Epstein files. And of course, Pam Bondi was behind the scenes. There's just a bunch of weird stuff going on, right? But there's also incompetence. So I think that it's really possible that they just let a lot of stuff slide for some reason because they're just stupid, quite frankly. But yet this goes back to my kind of core about everything. All right. Trump is not a mastermind of anything. He's a complete idiot. He's a windbag. He's this guy who's got, the girls from I've had enough podcasts. They ridicule him for being cankles and that he's got dementia and yada, yada, yada. And they do a fantastic job. Virginia does a fantastic job because that's just who she is. She was somebody like in elementary school and junior high school and high school that just had this great rap ears wit, but she also has, thank goodness, on the right side of things, right? Because she's calling out Christian fascists and their hypocrisy and everything else. But yet she doesn't have the information that I'm giving you. Okay. But I just make that point briefly because we've had this transition over the course of the last, I'm going to call it 8 years roughly. Okay. Where we depended on mainstream media. Then there was kind of the surrogates and mainstream media adjacent, which is cable news, that created echo chambers. And in the case of CNN, their format was, okay, look, let's have this person who's a supposed expert present this part of it. And then we're going to have them go against this person with an opposing view. And that's going to be what we consider our content. Meanwhile, both of those supposed experts are just delivering propaganda and they're all lying. Okay. The whole system's a lie and a failure. And so for those of you who are, posting things like Don Lemon is, some sort of hero because he got arrested as a journalist. Don Lemon has never been a journalist. He's been access to power. He hides things. I saw him do a interview with Michael Wolff where they both revealed, there's times where you cherry pick what you want to say based on what you want to do because you don't want to piss off the powers that be because you don't want to step on a landmine. The guy was a coward. He's not a journalist. Okay. He's certainly not a muckraking journalist like I am or others that I might reference as I get rolling on this whole thing. But when you go into the magnitude of the moment is such that starting in January till now, Doge ended up providing the opportunity for the likes of surrogates of Elon Musk and Peter Thiel to get inside all of the payment systems, the IRS, Social Security, to get information on every person in the United States. Who knows what they're doing with that data right now? But it's pretty clear, okay? And I was talking about Israel before, right? So let me bring this back to Israel. Okay. So my biggest beef with how this whole thing has rolled out, because it is clear to anybody who believes in liberty and justice and humanity and everything else, that everything that the Netanyahu government has been involved with is A, corruption first and foremost, but B, yeah, it was a genocide, or is and continues to be. Now, does that mean that I'm not, how do I want to try to untangle this in terms of, my clarity on the whole scenario with Israel, right? Because I know the history and I know the Balfour Declaration and I know imperialism and all of these other things, but I also know the Holocaust, okay? And I also know 1,000 years of anti-Semitism to boot, right? And all of these other complicated situations that have created, a group of people under a religious connection, and in some cases more, because of just the nature of how anti-Semitism worked. Yeah, cousins would marry cousins eventually, and there'd be certain characteristics that would make Jews look like there's a race, but supposedly they're not a race. But I'm not an expert in all of the genetic sort of code and details and this and that, and I understand certain diseases and blah blah blah. But however you lay it up, the Jewish people have been, in my estimation, some of the most resilient and brilliant humans in the history of the world. Not to mention the irony that it was the Manhattan Project filled with Jewish physicists that came out of Germany because of Hitler's, obviously Holocaust, that had the wherewithal to beat the Germans to the nuclear bomb, among other things. Okay. So, in the context of Israel, Israel has always been a tiny sliver of land. Okay. At least, it is since 1947, right? And not to mention, because of the Six-Day War and all of these different things with the Golan Heights and these wars, the UN declarations and blah 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 and agreements, you would have a scenario where it's like Israel would be attacked, they'd win the land in the Sinai, but they gave it back for peace, okay, and so on and so forth. So it just became this confangled, like, okay, there's always a negotiation going on, and you're always like steps away from the war, from a war, and Israel has had to exist that way to survive for a very long time. And yes, as a rock and roller from really 70s and 80s, one of my biggest influences in my life is Roger Waters and all things The Wall. And Roger Waters is an anti-fascist, but he also became the spearhead of the divestment from BDL, right? And I always thought to myself, okay, he's got a point and he's right about a lot of these things. And there's been a lot of horrific madness as a result of all of these different scenarios. And another thing that started to evolve over the course of the last 30 years was forces of billionaires like Sheldon Adelson that were providing money to extremist settlers to be able to go basically conquer the land, take the land, fight the land. We'll get you equipped. We'll do this, that, and the other. And that became a political sort of initiative within the Knesset, which then Netanyahu was deeply involved with, and it radicalized these guys. But beneath the surface of that was this technological capacity of Israelis. Okay. There's a lot of incredible science. There's a lot of incredible innovators. There's a lot of incredible verticals and venture capital and all of these other things, and very motivated people that would be able to do what I had just, said at the outset of this particular framing. The IDF could do like the most brilliant sabotage, like on the pagers that blew up in like 1,600 hands of, Iranian adjacent, was it Hamas or Hezbollah? These guys have become relentless at being able to defeat their enemy. Okay. And I want all of you who are like, oh man, Israel and Epstein are the devil and Satan and incarnate. Just put that aside for a second to think about what created Israel. 6 million people being led to slaughter, okay, after thousands of years of this and that and the other. And Yanis Varoufakis, one of the most brilliant minds in the world, who I think is one of the greatest and honest economists in the world, said, hey, this is all Europe's fault, as he starts, and then he deconstructs, his position against Israel and, of course, for the Palestinians and so on and so forth. But underneath all of this stuff, right, was that, and I've known this going back long before 9/11. I'm from Houston, Texas originally. I grew up, in the oil. My grandfather was an oil broker. My father was an attorney in the natural gas business. I've been in the fossil fuel matrix for a long time. I understand all the nature and all the different elements. I've learned more because of my documentary film work. I actually got a chance to sit next to the president, not the president, but he was the head of the Department of Rice's, geology slash oil development. And this guy was from Shell. He was like the general counsel of one of the largest oil companies in the world, right? And he laid out to me all of the details of how the oil industry works, right? So I've learned a lot. And, I come from this era of like, we always thought we were going to have peak oil and then there'd be madness and you have to transition to renewables. But then you get into, the nature of and the mechanics of fracking and all of this new technology that has moved us into this other place that's not good at the moment, really bad at the moment. But, finishing off with this Israel framing, because I think I just hope I can connect with those of you out there because it's just so earth-shattering what's been going on. It's so horrific. It's so, for people like me who think of the Holocaust as the North Star and never again, and that's what's created my entire DNA, it's very difficult to believe that Jewish people would be so crass, brazen, audacious, out of their freaking minds to think that a widespread, you know, genocide is the answer. Now, what's been going on for the last 15, 20 years is, the Israelis always said they're going to go mow the grass, right? There's like, altercations that happen, this, that, and the other. They built the wall, then they'd send the IDF in, they'd go take out a bunch of terrorists working for Hamas while Hamas is building all the weapons underground and, getting paid by all of these guys in places like UAE while the head of Hamas is stationed in UAE, yada, yada, yada. While people, the regular people that have nothing to do with anything, they're born into the faith, Islam, and then, they're Palestinians because that's where they've grown up and they've probably generations and everything else. They're tied to that land and everything else. But throughout that whole time period, from where I'm sitting, to the likes of Roger Waters and everybody else, if I had any influence at that time period, I would have been like, we've got to find the Martin Luther King of the Palestinians, and we got to bring him full forth to, one, encourage the Palestinians to live side by side with the Israelis first and foremost, and put him front and center, and then hopefully build a movement. But what the reality that was happening in the territories at that time, especially Gaza, anybody who was that, even though I've seen reports that there's a handful of people that match the description of what I'm talking about, whose names I don't recall right now because I don't read that much about them because everybody suppressed these guys. And they were probably fighting for the opportunity to live side by side in peace. The bad guys kept rising to the tide. What happened was the money was going to terror, which then led to the money on the IDF side to create its own terror, disguised as defense. Okay. The bad guys won, the extremists won. And nobody was thinking about that. It became polarized to the point where it was like, okay, you're either on, from the sea to the river or the river to the sea, right? There's no Israel. Well, that can't happen given everything that's happened. But at the same time, I would say to the Israeli people, you got to get rid of Netanyahu. You got to have a truth and reconciliation of your own sort. You got to clean up your own mess. And we got to sort this out. But you might think to yourself, okay, well, but how are they doing it? Because remember I mentioned this goes back to 9/11, right? In terms of my processing this stuff. What people are referring to right now with Israel is the Greater Israel Project. It's expansion. Let's have a war with Iran. Let's have a war with all of our, enemies from throughout. Let's devastate them all. And the only way we can really do that is if we have Saudi buy-in. And why would Saudi want to buy in? Well, because Saudi is seeing demonstrated right now, because it needs to keep its own power, right? What happens if all of the Saudi Arabian people decide we don't want to live under this tyranny anymore, of this strong arm where everybody can be beheaded for saying that women shouldn't be beaten, for example, right? A humanitarian sort of, and there has been movement within Saudi Arabia that is, moves at a glacial speed. I think women can now drive, for example. And that was like a big thing for a long time, right? At least in the international media. But the Saudis look at the Israelis And they play both sides all the time, and they all play both sides, and it's a complicated neighborhood and a tough neighborhood, and the friend of my friend is my enemy and all that, or the enemy, the friend of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, or however that whole juxtaposition happens. But the nature of Saudi is such that it's still oil, and it will be oil for at least probably the rest of our lifetimes. I thought we were going to hit peak oil and everything else. And there's complications because of the dollar reserve currency, and they're trading in yuan now, right now, which even further complicates things. But they paid off billions of dollars to Steve Mnuchin and the likes of what is Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, 6 billion, I think, to date, right, from UAE and other sources, including Saudi Arabia. That's the level of corruption that's been going on, I think, since 20. Let's see, what year are we at now? 2026. So let's go back to 2016-ish, right? And nobody could stop him at the State Department. Nobody could stop him at the Department of Justice. Nobody would stop him. Nobody stopped him at the FBI. All of this is posse comitatus. All of this is betrayal. All of this is using the office of the presidency as a tool to grease the pockets of the Trump family, while at the same time selling out the country, and nobody can stop him. Well, he's got a private military force that I believe, again, to further the point, was connected to all things Eric Prince and Steve Bannon and the billionaires that got all of these mercenaries that were coming back from 20 years of war. And the people that went to go fight the war, God bless a lot of these guys, right? But they got free agency, but they were Christo nationalists to begin with, right? We didn't have a draft. We've had certain people, mostly minorities, I believe, I don't know what the percentage is, but those that aren't minorities, they're pretty much white Christo fascists. And they have been those guys for a long time. And they got trained in, the Rangers and all of the top dogs, and they're really, really fucking good at what they've done. And they're really good. And they became free agents. And a lot of these guys were getting paid by the same characters, including Wilbur Ross in Cyprus and the Cyprus Bank that was a connection to Putin, and Putin's involved in all of this money laundering and all of these other things that, the billionaire Eric Prince, obviously created this private army. And I think that's what's overrun ICE now. I think that's what is ICE, in addition to, Kristi Noem and whatever her role is or isn't. And then, of course, all things, Elmer Fudd, that we call him, who took the $50,000, whose name eludes me at the moment. He's in Minnesota and yada, yada, yada. It's a stream of consciousness, and I'm pinballing. Yeah, but these are all of the things that are going on. And so Israel literally created its own oil. Okay. It created its own oil in A, technology, and B, a demonstration of absolute ruthlessness to be able to say to the Saudis, okay, look, tell you what, we can live in harmony with shared interest. And this, again, this is my theory. Okay. We can live in shared interest because you've got the money that the world, the oil that the world depends on. The United States is your backer, even though now you're trading in yuan. And I don't know how that's going to affect things immediately. But again, they paid off Trump. So there's that, right? Not to mention we're selling them F-35s and yada, yada, yada. So my theory is that Mohammed bin Salman, with all of his people, especially as it was relating to Jeffrey Epstein, we're kind of in the same sort of, this thing, right? Where it was like, okay, hey man, everybody's gonna have their way, with the hordes of these women that we pick off from Eastern Europe, this, that, and the other, sometimes beautiful models from Victoria's Secret, blah, blah, blah. You have these harems, all of the richest, most powerful people are in on it. And, Jeffrey is making all of these different deals with all of these different people. And, in the meantime, Netanyahu and these think tanks and these incubators for all of these companies end up, super involved with the likes of Palantir. And who is Palantir? Well, also do yourself a favor and ask yourself who is Cambridge Analytica, who is a lot of these other guys. They've been around for a long time. We've had a military industrial intelligence apparatus that, to the tune where the United States spends, I think we're over $800 billion a year. That's over, the budget for the military is more than the next 12 countries combined. And all of it has been predicated on oil wars. Okay. Trump just said it himself, invading Venezuela, right? It's all about the oil. That's the Trump mentality. That's the geopolitical consternation of the dollar reserve currency and everything that goes back to Bretton Woods in 1971. And as Israel evolved, They got more and more like, okay, we're not going to be defensive. We're going to be proactive and we're going to be relentless and we're going to take what is ours, that or what we want. I don't know what's inside their heads. All I know is a Jewish guy thinking back to the Holocaust and Hitler and all things of the paradigm of the Nazi regime. It was always my mentality is why didn't anybody just take Hitler out? These guys have a glass jaw if you get inside. Okay. Where was so what I grew up on was Donald Duck, not Donald Duck, Bugs Bunny, Donald Duck. I did Donald Duck too. Bugs Bunny, but the references are Bugs Bunny and Popeye, right? That's kind of my mentality as a child. What's up, Doc? Or open a can of whoop ass through spinach, right? It's like clever. Check things out. What's dangerous? How do you survive this? How do you flow? How do you go from one thing to another? How do you see the be in front of it? And again, in my life, by the way, I would evolve into a quarterback where I was an option quarterback, and then my best position in football was linebacker. You got to read. You got to see what's going on at all times. Then I became a very proficient skier and snowboarder and surf, and so I've been out there in the elements. I see things. This is my world's kind of a video game growing up in a sense of just act, react, do things, try to hone in and execute on a high level for good, for liberty and justice and truth, not for genocide, not for betrayal, not for theft, not for fraud. But for whatever reason, all of those mindsets require a certain kind of DNA where it's like you got to be able to see things. It's not genius. It's just patterns, quite frankly. Okay. And so that's what enabled me to go on my long journey to discover the $71 trillion truth that is really the core of everything. Okay. Do you think that the IDF or Netanyahu can do what he's doing without the Adelsons? And could the Adelsons do what they're doing with what I'm telling you? No. I'll give you an example along those lines. Apparently, Sheldon Adelson went from, I want to say it was $48 billion net worth in 2007 down to like 2 billion in 2009. And then he bounced back up to like 48 billion to 68 billion like 3 years later. Who does that? How does that happen? Well, because of what I'm telling you, okay, among other things. And he's not the only one. And I've seen this cabal of these billionaires and this international consortium since 9/11. That's the way I've been piecing this together. But the other side of it was always the stuff that was coming through the libertarians that would create the Project 2025 out of the Koch enterprises that we call the Heritage Foundation. And at that time, back in, let's say, 2008, 9, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was like this tax expert. He kept saying that, the goal is to shrink the United States government to something that you can fit into a bathtub, was the analogy, right? And it was to destroy the federal government, to destroy the New Deal, to destroy a government of, by, and for the people so they could create the privatization opportunities that we're seeing now. And like Paul Peltier, the former Department of Justice, 3 decades long veteran, said last Friday in our New Untouchables broadcast, it's the plan. It's paint by the numbers. This is what these guys have done. This is what really smart people with a lot of money, with a lot of direction, and some very innovative and shall we say, somewhat savvy people. I don't want to give Steve Bannon too much credit, but Steve Bannon is definitely seemingly the nexus of all this stuff. And again, I remind you, I know Steve Bannon knows who I am. Okay. I don't know if I completed the thought. The reason Sebastian Gorka knows who I am is because I interviewed him in my first film, Forward 13. I know I was on the radar. A guy that was my partner in this whole thing comes from a well-known family of means that they all know, I guarantee. So I feel like I was on their radar, but I knew it when we released our film, or excuse me, our series, The Con, where on our poster it says we were all sold a lie, and at the top header it says the revelation of the largest criminal conspiracy in history. I believe that Steve Bannon used that sort of framing to generate the propaganda that was associated with January 6th. And by the way, because I'm on this whole nexus of this military and intelligence sort of apparatus, that's all kind of this confluence between all of the intelligence agencies, CIA, Mossad, KGB, Putin, Netanyahu, all things, Epstein. The nature of the money, Steve Bannon, propaganda, mastermind. So Donald Trump is no mastermind. He's been a useful idiot the whole time. He's been in this case. The only question I have about Donald Trump is during the time period of The Apprentice, when Mark Burnett and NBC, was it 17 seasons? Were the people behind the scenes aware of what was happening in Trump's business empire to launder all of the money into Trump real estate and what that meant and to legitimize Trump? And could they be so ahead of the game that this was part and parcel to them running him in 2016? Although he wanted to run as early as, I don't know, probably the 80s. And by the way, I interact with David K. Johnson, who was his most hated nemesis in journalism going back 4 decades. And David K. Johnson has taught us that not only has Donald Trump been breaking the law for 4 decades and how he's done it, and nobody prosecuted him, but his whole family was in excess of fraud going back to his grandfather, who was a literal pimp. Okay. They've always been a con. And I call Don the con Rico Pedo Pig. So to try to close these things out and to kind of get to the next step of why, the woman triggered me this morning saying I have a Jesus complex and I, transcended that. No, I'm Neo in the Matrix because I have all this information. I'm trying to get you to understand the complexities of all of this geopolitical insanity that has hijacked the United States government to turn us into and it's been this way for a long time. We're not a democracy. We're a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses the full faith and credit of the United States to provide, a never-ending backstop to the mafiocracy that's now created fascism. And it's a fine line. I'll tell you, the CIA has been in the midst of this the whole time, from the very beginning. This is what they've done in theaters around the world, as well as configuring elections and so on and so forth. And the KGB has been done it as well. And it's been a big chess game in the Cold War and everything else. And oh yeah, by the way, the front page of the New York Times says that we're going back to a nuclear arms race because of what's happening with Trump. And yeah, man, it's a disaster, to kind of finish this thought first, before I go into some of the demonstrations of what this is all about. If you're out of your mind about Gaza, right? Like, let's just say that's your issue. You remember last year and the year before, we saw all sorts of campus demonstrations and everything else. And then Trump comes in, right? Even though Biden started putting the hammer down as well, of course, and a lot of people held Biden accountable that probably didn't vote for Biden and that manifested Trump, which is monumentally worse, which we were all saying. But at the same time, Biden had all of the information about Epstein, and so did Harris, and they never revealed anything. So what I continue to tell you is that the Republicans are all liars that work for this incredible criminal syndicate that have no loyalty or allegiance to the United States. They hate the United States. They believe in the Confederacy. That's what this is. This is a Confederate white supremacist Jim Crow hostile takeover that they lost after the Civil War, and they've been there since the John Birch Society. And it's all the same players that are all oil millionaires that are now oil billionaires that have completely created this sort of hegemony within, this paradox of the heritage foundations, where they have think tanks and they have, law firms and they have this, that, and the other. And oh yeah, by the way, all of these tall building law firms have capitulated to Trump, of which this guy, Paul Weiss, not Paul Weiss, sorry, Brad Karp from Paul Weiss, one of the most powerful, law firms in the country, just resigned today because his name's in the Epstein files. That shouldn't be the end of his story. That should be the beginning. What did he know? Who did he know? And all the look, everything that is the Epstein files is the tip of the iceberg, but it does show everybody, and everybody has the right reaction, that how is it possible that there's a cabal of a tiny group of billionaires that are beyond the pale insane? They're Caligula and then some. They're all liars. They're thieves. They're sick. They're just perverted. They're out of their fucking minds, and yet they're above the law because they own the law now completely. But they did for a long time. That's just Donald Trump, to me, is literally simply exposing and making it transparent for all to see everything I've been telling everybody for now years. He's taking this giant shit sandwich and shoving it down everybody's throats. And the reason why I thank him for that. It's kind of a gross way to have to thank somebody, right? But the fact is, it doesn't matter if you're like some guru in engineering and renewable energy at one of the greatest think tanks that you had your funding, that you could live in your own bubble and it didn't affect you. Donald Trump has just pulled all of the funding for renewable energy. He's waging war on renewable energy while pocketing billions and billions and billions of dollars from the fossil fuel industry. And you just had your funding cut. That means now you're looking around going, but what about me? And see, this is the problem with American society. We all live on our phones. We're all compartmentalized. We only feed the information that we get in all algorithms, and we can't see the forest for the trees. So a woman who's a good-meaning teacher of 40 years who, is anti-Trump and anti-MAGA is going to look at a guy like me who's got all the information who can take it down and, accuse me of having a Jesus complex. I keep telling you, I have maybe a Moses complex at best. But it's not because I believe on those guys. I'm just Patrick fucking Lovell, the dude who did the work. And I've got all of the answers that can take all of this down. So I just want to, finish the thought on this monstrosity of this global cabal that are literally destroying democracies because democracies aren't conducive to their corporate fascist states. And they're using the likes of Peter Thiel, who is what, a gay Nazi, and those are always the best, right? Think about everybody in the Hitler sort of orbit that were gay. There were a lot of them, trust me. I always blew my mind that the entire brown shirt thing, they were gay. They were all fucking gay, and it's just like, just, it's, again, I've never judged gay people. I don't care what your sexual preference is. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your gender is. I believe everybody has a right to live and live their best version, and that they should all try to work together and collaborate and corroborate, because the beauty to do another sort of metaphor for the Matrix. One of my favorite scenes is when Neo and Trinity are grinding in Zion. Maybe I should make a t-shirt, grinding in Zion. Those are the people that I would hang with, right? The beautiful people getting down because they're smart and they fight the bad people. That's the kind of, the world that I'm trying to freaking vibe with. And I've been to Grateful Dead shows, rock and roll shows, punk rock shows my whole life, man. I've been in the culture. I know what the culture is, okay? Across all, and I speak all of those languages, by the way. But I am just the repository of this ginormous truth that the Department of Justice, the FBI, the SEC, AGs around the country couldn't do because they got corrupted. And that was long before all things Trump. And I'm telling you right now that the reason we're in this madness is because the real bad guys, the Putins of the world, the MBSs, the Netanyahus, all these authoritarian thugs will kill anybody at a moment's notice, and everybody else to, prop themselves up. Just paint by the numbers fascist sort of thing. It doesn't matter if you're Kim Il-jung or, somebody in Syria or whatever, man. They all operate the same way. And the only way that can be broken is with the power of the liberty and justice for all, the way the American Constitution and the framers framed it after fighting the tyranny of King George III and all that goes with it, with the East India Trading Company and Parliament, and of course, the Royal Navy and the Redcoats. I mean, that's what we are. That's what we are. And then Trump just said, you know what, I'm just going to stop pretending. He didn't say it. It was really the billionaire class that realized he was the transactional pig that he was. And they're like, hey, look, all we got to do is control the Supreme Court. We already had Congress. And now we already bought all media. And now that's happening even further because of the mega mergers and acquisitions and all of these monopolies. And that's been going on for 20 years. That's why I'm a muckraking journalist. That's why I'm fighting all of these bastards and giving you this perspective. And I know that there's people out there that should be allies with me, but I'm not going to be perfect for everyone, nor do I intend to be. I'm just telling you right now that I'm against genocide of all sorts. Doesn't matter if it's in, the Congo, or if it's in Vietnam or Cambodia, holiday in Cambodia, to call back to the dead Kennedys, and or Gaza. Look, again, I just want to reiterate what I would have done if I could and I had the power. I would have found a way to bring to the fore, to try to convince the people in Gaza that it's in their best interest to cooperate and live side by side with the Israelis instead of decide it's all or nothing. Because that was the whole premise of Hamas. You know, it's they live in a state of perpetual war that is going to wipe Israel out. That was their stated objectives. How come, and this is a message, if anybody gets this to, my man who I mentioned from Pink Floyd, Roger Waters, please answer that for me. I mean, I love you, Roger, but you got to understand that you can't be, like, let's compare this to Malcolm X and, for example, the Reverend Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was a genius of oratory, right? And he thought through things very poetically, but at the same time, so genuinely. And again, that just created the tapestry of the brilliance of what he was dealing with. I just want you to live true to what you put on paper. And in the United States, for example, yeah, we've had Manifest Destiny, the war between Texas and Mexico, all of the, scenarios to where, and I know a lot of the history because I'm from Texas originally, of the war in, between Texas and Mexico and what ultimately happened, where, after the Texans defeated the Mexicans, we offered their oligarchs, money to basically shit on all of their, the proletariat, or the, really just at that time, the people, the farmers or whatnot. And they, Mexico just turned into an oligarchic, nightmare, right? Which then led, of course, to the cabals of all of the drug dealers. Why can't I think of um, who are relentless as they get, and who, by the way, Donald Trump supposedly is having oral with at the moment. Why can't I think of the cartels? That's what I'm trying to say. The cartels, yeah, and of course, Americans like to do cocaine, or they had been throughout my lifetime. And yeah, there's a will, there's a way, and people will get it to them. And then all of a sudden the CIA gets into it. This goes back and all sorts of crazy ass shit, right? So it's a continuum. Nothing happens in a vacuum. I can explore all of these different things, but at the same time, I want those of you who are just super tied to one thing to try to bust through your sort of worldview, shatter it, the illusion, to get you to the point that I'm trying to get you to understand. That if we want to create a renaissance, which I do, of possibility, by crushing the misery of tyranny, then you have to understand the Big Bang of truth, which is that we've been providing tens of trillions of dollars illegally to the system, meaning the financial system. They're all hyenas of villainy, if that's even a word. They're villains. If this is a cartoon, and we're thinking about Gotham and everything else, everybody's playing for the board. Everybody's a liar, especially if they got a lot of money. And I'm talking about hedge fund managers. I'm talking about private equity guys. Their entire freaking systems are short-term growth destroying systems, because they can get it from the banks, and they can make it look like their share price is it's just all manipulation through lies, and extremely complicated lies, and cash flow and everything else. And I've become an expert in all that shit, particularly as it relates to the 2008 great financial crisis, because I had to deconstruct the entirety of the system to be able to get to this revelation that, okay, well, wait a second, how are they getting paid? Well, they got paid because in 2009, during the Obama administration, while we were pretending Congress was going to save the world with liquidity through TARP for $400 billion, we provided $33 trillion illegally. And that's because of the statutes. And I've got that on my website at thecleannewdeal.org. We provided $33 trillion illegally to stabilize the system for the bad guys without putting them all in jail. So what do you think would happen if you give a crack addict a safe filled with endless crack, and then you give him the code? What do you think is going to happen? What we're in the midst of. And so what we have to do is we have to understand that I'm not Jesus. At least I hope not. I want to win this one. I'd rather you think of me as Patton, but I'm somewhere between. I mean, my mindscape is, Joe Strummer, Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Earl Campbell, Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, Jim Lovell, third cousin of my dad. I could go on and on with all sorts of influencers in my life that have developed the tapestry of whatever version my CPU unit is based on my experience. But yeah, man, I come from a land of courage, truth, justice, and get it done, man. And I know how people that do things get it done. And I'm trying to encourage those of you out there that get this, that are entrepreneurs, that are people who don't want to buy into crypto and the lie and do all sorts of scams, this, that, and the other, that want to rebuild the country. This is the greatest opportunity in the history of the world. Okay. Once we destroy the corruption that is destroying all of us. And quite frankly, at this stage of the game, like I've said before, nobody's safe. You can't be in your silo. You can't be an island to yourself. Nobody's going to save us. The Democrats do not have a plan. I like what Chris Murphy says. I like what Rakana says. I like what, Rakakis says, and a handful of others, but Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, AOC, they don't have a paradigmatic formulation of how to destroy corruption, nor are they speaking it, right? I was watching, on Lawrence O'Donnell the other night, and I keep saying Rakakis, but it's not Rakakis, from Maryland. He'll come to me in a minute. And he's great. He's great. He's really good. But he doesn't say we're going to create a truth and reconciliation scenario to sort out all of the different crimes that this administration has done, and we're going to throw them all in jail if you elect us. Why wouldn't he say that? Considering that we literally saw these guys, ICE, murder citizens for expressing their constitutional right. Are you kidding me? But that's just one quotient of this whole thing, right? There is no plan. Bernie Sanders doesn't have a plan. Their plan is that everybody grows so disgusted by Trump that we're going to be able to just vote in any Tom, Dick, or Harry running under the Democratic Party, that these guys who created this madness, that hid Epstein from us, that gave tens of trillions of dollars to Wall Street, the guys that destroyed us by creating this scenario to allow all of the worst criminals of the world to basically overrun our country. What's happening right now is Russia from 1999 onward, okay? In real time, transparently. And you're going to question me that I don't know what I'm talking about. No, you just don't understand what's going on. And I'm trying to break through your dystopia to make you aware that there's a chance. There's not a chance. It's almost too easy. But only if tens of millions of people get on the same page. It's the only way. And I'm asking you, I hope you trust me. I hope eventually you go, where's that guy been? Most people do that after they find out what I'm talking about. And then they do, then they come on board. But I need people that do this every day, day in, day out, that are going to champion the Clean New Deal. They're going to find candidates with me around the country to run on the Clean New Deal in the midterms. And we're going to have to do everything we can to get this truth, to basically create a schism in the Democratic Party. I don't want to compare it to MAGA because MAGA is a bunch of fools that created this situation, but that create just the opposite of MAGA, but by not being involved with the DNC. The DNC has been playing ball. And look, everybody wants, on that side, Obama to run right in on his white horse. And I'm sure they got a plan on that, a plan for that. Obama sold us all out. He's the reason we're in this madness. He allowed tens of trillions of dollars illegally to go to Wall Street for destroying tens of millions of people. And for all of you, like, what the fuck is going on now? I mean, this has been going on for 14 freaking years. And by the way, they used the courts to do it. Yeah, the courts destroyed us, but they got just people to play ball in certain matrix, and they just make sure that all the cases ran through then, and they just basically rubber stamped bullshit foreclosures on people so that the system could get away with getting all of the real estate back that they would recycle and they use themselves. They were playing with house money that they destroyed in the first place. And some think that was, by the way, that's what Steve Bannon and Epstein were talking about. I'll tell you one thing before I go into this last section. You really do need to watch the Steve Bannon interview with Epstein because it does more to explore Epstein's mindset and how he responded to certain things than all of the influencers out there that talk 24/7 about Epstein. Just hear it from the horse's mouth. But Bannon does ask some really interesting questions. And the first question that he asked that I thought was just super telling. Now, by the way, he does that in between a whole bunch of bullshit that was like esoterical and philosophical and, trying to butter, puff up Epstein to make him legitimate and everything else when Epstein's a complete fucking clown that got a lot of power because he had compromat on everybody because he was apparently really good at getting that information. And did he do it by himself? No, it was a system, but he was definitely the point person. Okay. But Bannon asked Epstein, okay, you're in jail in 2008. The world's collapsing. You have two calls. What did you do? Epstein's like, well, I called the CEO of Bear Stearns, Jimmy Kane, and then I called the guy who was, I think he was a CFO. Was he a CFO? But he was this guy Staley, who was next in line to become the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, because that's where all of his money was. And he alludes to the fact that he knew that they were going to get paid, they were going to get bailed out because of what was happening with Maiden Lane, which is, I know a lot about Maiden Lane, which is the precursor to what I'm telling you about giving $71 trillion to the bad guys illegally. But it would make a whole lot more sense if he was managing Putin's money. It would make all the sense in the world. But I'm going to show you something else that I think is really indicative of what you need to understand about that interview. That really, unfortunately, Bannon asked the right questions. So I'm gonna share my screen real quick. So I always revert to the New York Times first. Okay, so on the New York Times, look right away. Today's New York Times. A nuclear arms control era comes to an end amid global rush for new weapons. Well, that's all I needed to hear because in some ways, I think that these global oligarchs are trying to destroy half the world's population so that they can basically pick up all the pieces and live like kings, and pharaohs and whatnot. Well, they can have their, harems of women all over the world. I mean, it just kind of seems like that they're doing that. So, yeah, well, why don't we just destroy half the population with a nuclear arms Armageddon? Boy, that would kind of make sense. Okay, so what else did I see? And this was from a few days ago. So, this I think is something you all need to tap into. So, Scott Bessent, the director of the Treasury, who's a complete failure hedge fund fucker, is said on the front page of the New York Times yesterday that the Fed lacks accountability and lost public trust. And this is all about putting this other guy that was in the Epstein files to replace Jerome Powell, who is also incredibly corrupt, at the head of the most powerful central bank in the world. And this is all about, in a House committee hearing, the Treasury Secretary declined to say if he's the president the power to fire a member of the central bank's board, which of course goes to Lisa Cook, right? And she's a black woman on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Okay. Basically, the way I respond to this is that this is a liar calling out liars for the lies that I'm revealing to you so that the worst liars of all can take over. Okay. This in line with crypto and everything else that's going on. It's not a good situation. And I think they're just basically brazenly showing their cards. But if you don't understand how it was the Federal Reserve that provided tens of trillions of dollars illegally for free, you don't have this context. How would you like to, for example, I give you a very simple analogy. Let's just say you're a parent of three children, right? You've got a house, you've got your boat, you've got your cars, you've got a vacation house, you've got all these things. You've got huge debt, right? Let's say you were able to get all of those things because you were a liar, you were involved with a Ponzi scheme, and you were stealing everybody's money to get the money that you were getting on credit, to get in all this debt, but you're in debt up to your eyeballs. If you can't keep the Ponzi going, it's all going to collapse. And then suddenly it does. And instead of having, investigators come and find out what you were involved with and that you were destroying, all of the people you lied to, the bank just comes up and they roll you another, I don't know, fucking 10x in liquidity. That's what we did to the financial system. It's really that simple. Okay. And this is what it's all about. This is what Putin knows. This is what Epstein knows. This is what Bannon knows. This is what all of these clowns knew. And this is why they've been stealing from me, because they're the ones lying to you. Well, I'm telling you that, the truth that can change everything. And yet there's people that are going to, blame me or call me a liar or the messenger or discount me or discredit me. It's just hilarious. It's not hilarious. It's just fucking ridiculous, but it is what it is. Okay. So I've got to try to convince you that I know what I'm talking about because of everything that's going on. And I'm a good guy in this equation. Okay. So here we go. Trump is blocking hundreds of wind and solar projects nationwide. This has been ongoing. He's basically rug pulling all the money that was already approved in the Biden administration for all of these incredible research and development projects to build a renewable energy paradigm. They're destroying it to go backwards, given all that is going on. Not to mention just climate change and global warming and the acidification of reefs and destruction of life as we know it. I mean, guys, it really is the end of the world. I mean, seriously, it's so biblical. It's ridiculous. It's so Armageddon and all the end of the world and the liars and the bad guys. And I mean, it is. And again, I'm not trying to say I'm Jesus and coming back. I'm just telling you I have the truth, and the truth is our Savior. Okay. But this is in context to all of you geniuses that are engineers or scientists and people who are entrepreneurs. People, it's not money. Where are we going to find the money? That's the question. Okay. And that's what I'm revealing to you. So the Clean New Deal is where all of the answers are. I'm just going to give you a couple of pieces here, and then I got to be done with this because I've got way too much to do and not enough time to do it. So the Clean New Deal just says that we're not a democracy. We don't function as capitalists. It's socialism for billionaires, and corruption rules everything. This is the answer to Project 2025. I encourage you to explore it. It tells you who we are, how it affects you. It talks about what we must do, which is more prescient every single day. And we need millions to do what it is that I'm laying out. But the precepts of the Clean New Deal are extremely important for you to understand. And the way I formulate it is you got to have 4 questions. And again, going back to Moses, these are the 4 questions, right? What is qualified immunity? Does ICE have qualified immunity? Why does why does Trump have immunity? Why is he a king? Well, what is judicial immunity? Then what is executive presidency and presidential immunity? And then ultimately, what is the electoral college? When you understand those 4 pieces, you put together the Rubik's Cube to get the eureka and the double thumbs up. Like, that one guy who saw the moon and all of the rainbows. You remember that dude who was on mushrooms? I think he was like, it's beautiful. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, because that gets you into understand that everything's a lie. Everything's a perversion of power. Everything is you're a sucker who doesn't understand how things work. And yeah, there's people above the law in our country. They just decided to tear down all of the black and white aspects of the Constitution that, of course, we're about to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. For what? For a guy who stole billions of dollars transparently from our enemies, that's destroying innovation and technology, literally killing people around the world because you rug pulled US aid, I think 600,000 people to date, mostly children, in addition to destroying science and the law and education. For what? Authoritarianism. To do what? To have stupid white people be higher on the rung than the lowest. How did it go with the LBJ? If you can convince the lowest white man that he's higher on a ladder than the highest black man, you can pick his pockets all day. That's their formula, and it has been forever. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. When a group of men discover plunder, they create a legal code to authorize it and a moral code to glorify it. It's authoritarianism. It's tyranny. It's aristocracy. It's fascism. It's the same shit over and over and over. It's humanity. It's the same verse, same as second verse, same as the first, or ever what incarnation we're in. And yeah, the history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. Blah blah blah. People, there's a way systems work. We don't live in a vacuum. This didn't just happen. It's a continuity of everything that's been happening for a long time. So you have to have intrinsically the answers to be able to rise to the moment that this insanity has manifested. And of course, as they've said, in only 1 year, Project 2025 has accomplished, I guess, 50% of what's in the initiative. So what we have to do is we got to create a modern day Glass-Steagall Act to separate commercial banking from investment banking and make sure that the full faith and credit of the United States can never again be used to provide exigent lending to a global racketeering enterprise. Once you understand everything I'm telling you, that's exactly what we've done. And that's the trick of everything. The flip side of that, and I'll give credit to Bernie and AOC and anybody else who gets on that bandwagon, you got to end Citizens United. Legalized corruption's got to end. The best ROI is in a legislature that's going to write the laws, to do the dance, to tell the people what they want to hear while lying to them. That's what the DNC has been doing for the last, I don't know, 30 years. Okay. Yeah, guys, it's the end of the line for democracy and freedom and liberty and justice for all. But it's also the best opportunity that we've ever had if the Clean New Deal explodes through this, because I know many of you might say, what about Medicare? What about renewable energy? What about this, that, and the other? How are we going to pay for it? Well, look at number three. We're going to demonstrate that $71 trillion was looted for approximately 300,000 people. A lion's share went to the top 0.001% and all that that means. And that's the Elon Musk's and, all of these bad billionaires, Bad Bunny's playing at the Super Bowl, all of these bad billionaires that were involved with a gang rape, not just of, women, or I should say girls, in this pedophilia racket of perversion. And I used to use all this stuff as a metaphor, like frat guys that gang rape and roofie, the sorority girls, and then they all decide to lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate and blame the victim. I used to use that as a metaphor. And then after all of these Epstein files, you find out, no, it's real. And you've got literally the biggest dorks from Dershowitz to Larry Summers to Bill Gates to all of these other guys that are in on it. It's like, holy shit, right? But we have a starting base because we're a fiat currency and we're sovereign, currency, and or the dollar, world's reserve currency for the moment. And yeah, we can fund anything we want. Congress has the power of the purse. There's a lot of technical ways we can figure out all these things, but we can't do it unless tens of millions of people realize first that we've given tens of trillions of dollars to the guys destroying us and providing for genocide and technology and Palantir and all of these things globally, that everybody else wants to just like pick and choose and cherry pick and be like, okay, this is horrible and everything else. But you got to look deeper. You got to understand the paradigm. This is a paradigm. This is the question and the resolve that I've been on for literally since 2008, reconfiguring my mind to understand what is, to understand what can be done, because this is the black box of truth. If consider this in a metaphor that the USS, 747 went down, and you're trying to understand what caused the accident so that you can make sure it doesn't happen again, you look in the black box. Everything I'm giving you is the black box. Moving forward, we got to expand SCOTUS to 13 to balance out the Roberts Court, which have completely betrayed us. Then we have to end judicial immunity. We have to end qualified immunity. We have to end presidential immunity. Nobody in this country is above the law. Nobody. We have to have some of that $71 trillion that we start off with, create the investigations in the Department of Justice and FBI to basically root and stem all of the bad guys that have completely metastasized, because the tumor is corruption and the cancer now is the fascism that it creates. Okay. And the only way that you can destroy it is with the tumor of truth, which is the Clean New Deal. And that means we got to end the Electoral College, and we can certainly discuss how that's all going to happen. But we have to have a political movement of tens of millions getting behind this, with people that are going to run, that hopefully we're all going to pitch in at some point to be able to create this movement, so that we can get people from Maine to LA to Seattle to Miami to Anchorage to Honolulu to Puerto Rico to Austin to yada, 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 and everywhere in between, to run on the Clean New Deal. That's the only way this is going to happen, man. We've got to empower ourselves, because nobody is going to save us. And yeah, like I said, I've spent years and millions of dollars and thousands of hours to get this information, to hand it to you on a platinum platter. And then finally, we got to institute term limits for U.S. senators and representatives, because that is tyranny. And then we got to prohibit all insider trading. Marjorie Taylor Greene coming in with 700,000 and leaving with 27 million over the course of 6 years is insane. And nobody's even questioning that. She had the great exit package. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go against MAGA because they're involved with Epstein. Okay, see ya. And she just cross-fits her way out of that, Mr. Ed. It's not funny. I'm just going to finish here, and I'll just say, guys, please, please understand. I went way longer than I wanted to. I always do. Thank you for tuning in. I'd love to see your comments below, but I'm looking for leaders. I'm looking for dynamic activists. I'm looking for people that believe in truth, liberty, and justice for all. Again, the reason why all of us, and this is the way I grew up, right? I grew up in Texas originally, where we would have, outlaw counties where there'd be like, strip joints and all sorts of bars, this, that, and the other, fireworks as far as the eye can see. You can get guns, blah, blah, blah. And then right on the county line, right next to it, is the super religious folk and the blue laws and all of these things. And it seemed like people would go back and forth, right? They'd go find their inner demon, and then they try to save themselves. I'm like, you guys are fucking nuts. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, that's your freedom, as long as that doesn't, it doesn't curtail my freedoms, right? I like music and poetry and novels and great television series. I'm a producer. My favorite television series, and I love the characters of Thomas Shelby in Peaky Blinders, Walter White in Breaking Bad, Jon Snow, and really a constellation of other characters in Game of Thrones, in Succession, and many others. And all of these incredible series over the course of last, including Batman, or I should say the Penguin, which I thought was phenomenal. They tell all of these stories are the same story I'm telling you. I'm just giving you the facts of how this whole thing works and all of the obfuscation of all of these, gatekeepers and this fictionalized. I mean, this is really going on. Okay. And the Epstein files, I'm sure. Oh my God, did I not? Oh my God. I got to share again because this is the most important thing I wanted to share. I'm so sorry. Okay. Look, so check this out, right? So by the way, this is my YouTube page. I'm up to 744 truth bombs now. You could look at this. I mean, this last week, we've had Mark Dan, state AG of Ohio, saying everybody's got to flood Hennepin County in Minnesota, challenging the prosecutor to bring indictments for the murders of Renee, Nicole Good, and Alex Pretti. I spoke with my friend and my compatriot, Egberto Willis, who's a guy I really love. We talked about all of these issues. June Carbone, I think, is masterful. I think she's the soul of, what has to take shape to move forward. But she asked the detailed questions of what we should all be asking about the Epstein files from a high level prosecutor who used to work at the DOJ. Her background is Princeton and Yale, and she's the Rabina Chair of Law, Science, and Technology at the University of Minnesota. She's just a genius, and she just cuts through everything and just asks the questions that we should be asking, which is the failure of those to prosecute. Okay, and then here, my colleague Roseanne Raviola and I basically lay it all out what I'm doing now. And then you can see I've got the new Untouchables. Every week we do this, and then so on and so forth. I've got so much incredible information here, so please check it out. But what I wanted to go back to finish off with here. Okay, now look, this is the final thing. Steve Bannon interviewed Jeffrey Epstein, and it was incredible because the whole thing's a setup, like I told you before. Epstein had 2 calls from prison. He called the CEO of Bear Stearns and the CEO, second in command at JP Morgan Chase. Why? Because he could, and they would talk to him. Why? Because he brought a lot of money to them. Why? Because of everything that blew up everything else. As it turns out, a lot of this laundered money from around the world was going into subprime to pump what became the 2008 great financial crisis. And when they blew up the world, the first guys that got bailed out were the guys that Jeffrey Epstein made a call to. Honestly, I know that. I mean, I don't have the physical evidence of that part. It's just, I know all of the information of what happened, and it just makes all the sense in the world. Especially, it just blows my mind because I think back, there was a time, we're about to enter the Winter Olympics. There was a time at the Beijing Olympics, I believe it was, in 2008, when Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson was side by side, I believe, with I forget the name of the premier of China. It's hard to pronounce for me, and I'm getting them conflated with some other Chinese names because I'm thinking of CZ and whatever. Xi Jinping, I think is the name. But I believe Putin was there as well. Okay, and as it turns out, if Epstein was managing the money of Putin, flooding our markets with this money that was going into subprime, that the United States illegally, by the way, and I showed this in the precepts of the Clean New Deal, or I shouldn't say the precepts of the Clean New Deal. I show this if you go back to the Clean New Deal and you go up here to the top section of these columns, look at white paper and go to Federal Reserve Act 13.3. I lay out the whole thing. But the most important interview is this audio interview with Rajan Cohen of Sullivan and Cromwell. Sullivan and Cromwell is the law firm, the legendary law firm on Wall Street that created the CIA. Okay. He was there picking up all the pieces of the great financial crisis. Okay. And he says exactly what they did and why they did it, which was all illegal. And nobody knows that. That provided tens of trillions of dollars. And why didn't the New York Times tell you this? Why didn't the Chicago Herald tell you this, or Miami Sun Times, or whatever these Los Angeles? Because they got, basically overrun by private equity ventures a long time ago and owned by billionaires whose money is tied to all of this. Okay. Does it make sense how they can take over? I just showed in one of my truth bombs, I'll go back to this a couple of weeks ago. If you go down to truth bomb number, let's see, where was it? Truth bomb right here. TNU episode 52, Too Big to Fail. Since Thanksgiving, we've given $76 billion to JP Morgan Chase illegally to backstop another major trade like the London whale in silver. It's insane. And so all of this stuff can, being equal. And I think I've laid out plenty for you to consider. And hopefully it's as mind boggling as it is for me, because it's amazing that I'm in this position to be able to give you this information when nobody else can or will. But I will tell you, in addition to Steve Bannon, who I know who knows me because of our poster, and I should show it to you. In fact, I will. So if you don't know my work, I'm going to show the con. Let's see if I can get an image here of my poster. So this is the poster of our series. And check this out. See, the truth, shucks, we'll get there. If they'll give me the full. The truth behind the largest criminal conspiracy in American history. And it says, we were all sold a lie. Okay. Do you guys remember what they were selling during J6? That it was all a lie? That came out right after our film happened. I swear to God that Steve Bannon branded it that way. But Steve Bannon is a pretty damn sharp guy. I don't think he's as smart as he thinks he is, but he's certainly clever and he's been successful doing what he's done. And, it's amazing that they couldn't hold him down. But I want you to see this, okay? So going back to my whole Israel analogy and what's going on in money and good things and bad, Steve Bannon may have been doing this to try to rehabilitate Jeffrey Epstein's image in a project that was soon to come. But that means he knew certain things, right? Based on some of the questions that he's asking. And they get to the end of this interview and he asks Epstein, okay, look, I'm gonna let it speak for itself. And I'm gonna see if it fills in the blanks for you. But check this out.
Because again, I'm privileged enough to have people around me who've given lots of philanthropic gifts to institutions of higher learning. And when I said the impact, how do you judge the impact of your giving? And we sat down and said, no really new ideas have come out. And I realized that, of course, it hasn't come out because we've been looking at using science and mathematics, and it's the wrong tool. It's obvious.
Institutions that are set up and try to put forward knowledge and understanding and truth, should they take your money?
Derek Bach at Harvard said, taking money for good causes is a good thing.
So if Hitler took all the gold out of the teeth of the Jews and said, I want to give this to Heidelberg University to fund the Leibniz chairs so that I can study high energy physics, Derek Bach would say that was fine?
Again, it's these questions are questions where good people on both sides, like your Charlottesville, could differ. I don't know the answer.
So tell us the two. Give us the two answers. What the one answer why it shouldn't be, and then the one answer. Derek Bach says, I'll essentially take cash from anybody because I got so many projects, so many good guys, and this is the way I'll do it. So I'm indifferent to where the cash comes from. Money's money, and if I got good guys, I'm the fiduciary. Says these are good people and this is good research. Okay, I'll take the cash from any source, including you. What's the other argument?
Let me give you that. I know in my case,
is your money dirty money?
If you live,
I just asked a question. Is your money dirty money?
No, it's not. So, in fact,
why is it not dirty money?
Because I earned it.
But you earned it. We went back to this before. You earned it. You earned it advising the worst people in the world right, that do enormous bad things, and just to make more money.
So instead of asking me the question, should you take the money? Because I think it's a legitimate question.
You think it's a legitimate question?
Yes, no question. Because I think ethics is always a complicated subject, but I can tell you that with the money I gave to help try to eradicate polio in Pakistan and India, instead of asking me whether that money should be given to these children for vaccines, I think you might want to ask their mothers who received the vaccine, who know their child now won't get polio, and ask them if Epstein should have helped these people.
If we walked in, you're a mathematician. If we walked into that clinic where they're giving that money out to these people that are the most dire straits of poverty and sickness, and told them that the money was coming from class 3 sexual predator?
Tier 1.
Tier 1's the highest and worst?
No, I'm
the lowest.
I'm the lowest.
You're the lowest. Okay, tier 1, you're the lowest. But a criminal.
Yes.
That the money came from them. What percentage of people do you estimate? I understand you don't like probabilities. Do you estimate would say, I don't care, I want the money for my children?
I would say everyone said, I want the money for my children.
Did they know where the money came from?
If you told them, I told them the devil,
100%.
The devil himself said, I'm going to exchange some dollars for your child's life.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
No, but I do have a good mirror.
It's a serious question.
Sorry.
Do you think you're the devil himself?
I don't know. Why would you say that?
Because you have all the attributes. You're incredibly smart. You remember the devil is somebody knows
what?
The devil's brilliant. You read Milton's Paradise Lost.
No, the devil scares me.
Satan is the at the number 1 or 2 archangel, and the reason he goes to hell and leads the rebellion is because he can't be the top guy. And his thing is, I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven.
I saw that in a movie once called American Dharma. I don't remember who said it. Okay, we have to go.
Okay, good. Okay.
Okay. So if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know based on what I just, laid out here, again, to close this up for me, one of the ways I had to frame my own journey was because I'm a kind of a 90s guy in terms of film. That's really when I got into it. And I used to really just love to explore film and all the great auteurs at that time. It was a great time for independent film, quite frankly. Thank you, Sundance Film Festival, at that time before it became commercialized. But one of my favorite films was The Usual Suspects. And Kevin Spacey's character goes on this whole, sojourn about Kaiser Sose. And it's really clever how it happened. But he posed the question, the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist. Right? And I also transmuted, I guess, would be a good way to describe it. One of my favorite characters in a wonderful film that Denzel Washington was the lead. He played a character called Ezekiel Rawlins. And in a pivotal moment in the film when he realized the whole system's corrupt and everybody was playing him, he said, I got tired of them pissing on my head, telling me it was rain. They must have thought I was some kind of new fool. And therein led him figuring all out, all the pieces and turning the tables and prevailing. And that's what we have to do. I'm telling you, all of the information that I have, you're not going to hear from Bernie. You're not going to hear from anybody else. You heard from Steve Bannon ask the question to Epstein himself, are you the devil? Because he knew his money was dirty. He knew exactly where his money was coming from. We're seeing different pieces of that. And he made the most horrific, analogy, but it was apt, I hate to say. So would you excuse Hitler taking all of the gold or fillings, I guess, of Jewish people in the Holocaust and melting it down and whatever and giving it to some sort of think tank that comes up with some great, in his analogy, energy, stuff. And it transitioned to Epstein trying to correlate, well, look, you have to look at my funding polio, vaccines in Afghanistan, or he said Pakistan, I believe. And which is reputation laundering, which is really what all of this stuff was in terms of hedging and giving people hijacked because they get them on camera, like Bill Gates and everybody else, but then they're going to take their money for all of these things, and it's all song and dance and reputation laundering. Or in the case of Saudi Arabia now, I know they're involved with, believe it or not, the Redford Institute. And shame on you, Amy Redford, if you happen to see this at some point. For Robert Redford's, honestly, his movement to clean energy, and you're gonna pay for stuff by the Saudi, sovereign wealth fund or however that works. Are you kidding me? Again, it's reputation laundering, and that's what these billionaires do, and they're all liars, and they're all con artists, and they're all just they are the greatest trick the devil ever played, was to convince the world he didn't exist. I mean, I'm seeing stuff with the royal family of England and everybody who was involved with Epstein. I mean, it's just, the list goes on, and what they were doing, in the pedophilia and the dementia, and then the Department of Justice not doing anything about it. And we're not talking about Pam Bondi's Department of Justice. We're talking about Biden's Department of Justice. And Merrick Garland, where were you? You should be furious, okay? You should be, what did I used to say? Justifiably furious. So the bottom line is that Epstein said it himself. He didn't want you to know what he was doing, and he was doing all sorts of horrible things, but he was doing it more than Bannon got at him. But Bannon asked the press here a question, and I'd asked that to all my Jewish brethren in Israel that are like, hey, you know what? We can play ball with Saudi Arabia, right? They're in our neighborhood, but who was Saudi Arabia in 9/11? Well, really, we knew where the terrorist cells were, just like the Israelis knew that the attack was coming a year in advance. We knew who was funding them. Am I saying that Saudi Arabia was the mastermind of 9/11? Not as much, or what's the right way to describe this? That would be like saying that Donald Trump was the mastermind of J6. No, they played ball. Somebody told them to do what they did. My personal theory is the neocons with then VP, oh my God, Darth Vader himself, right? Can't even think about George Bush and oh my God. I know some of you are out there going, you'll say it in the comments. Dick Cheney, Jesus Christ, how can I forget the Veep, right? Anyway, look, this is insane. This is insane. Imagine if our country allowed a catastrophic attack on our people, on our soil, to take down something to justify 25 years plus of war that the media never asked questions about. They just accepted the 9/11 Commission report, which was bullshit. I'll tell you that. I'm not saying that this whole thing was a truth or conspiracy, that Israel was involved in. Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, not even close. But I would say that they hid just the basic components of what Saudi Arabia's involvement, which would then lead to potential other involvements. We know that Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice prevented the intelligence agencies from working together. This was 25 years ago. We had all sorts of surveillance technology that could have blown this thing. It was the easiest thing in the world to prevent, and it happened. That's the reality. That's the same for 2008. I've got all of the answers for 2008. I don't have all the answers for COVID. I can tell you what happened during the PPP loan fraud. That wasn't just Somalis in Minneapolis. It was Donald Trump and his crew and all sorts of people involved with the illegal use of Federal Reserve Act 13.3 to float casinos and cruise ships that all gave a ton of money back to Donald Trump. I mean, you see this confluence of how this works? There's only one way a system functions, and that's with integrity. And the only way that works is with humans that have character and professionalism to be able to do this. The only way that happens is if the citizenry is informed with the knowledge of who did what, when, and how to be able to turn the tables. That's how it's designed in the United States. And we're going to maybe not have elections. So I went, way further than I wanted to, but I think it was actually kind of effective today. I actually believe I said what I needed to say. And that part about Bannon asking Epstein, "Are you the devil?" The whole apparatus were minions of Satan's army. Okay, if you want to use, a metaphor. And again, I'm not religious, I'm not spiritual, but I will end up on this, right? If you, me, and everybody you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in liberty and decency and dignity and credibility and sustainability and opportunity and equality, if we merge behind the clean new deal and unity, we will turn the tables on the misery of tyranny and unleash the renaissance of possibility. And when you become a big bang of truth, right? When you become a nuclear reaction to the big bang of truth, you force light into darkness. What are the first words in the Bible or the Torah? Let there be light. The big bang of truth to force light into darkness. And this isn't hyperbole. It isn't faith-based. It isn't philosophical. It isn't cosmology. It's just, it's not rocket science. It's racketeering. And I got all the answers. Jesus Christ. Thank you for listening. Please let me know what you thought of this one. And I would love to see, please, will you guys, whoever's out there listening to this, who's inspired, who's like, holy fuck, I got to get involved with this, reach out to me and Roseanne Rabiello Mile. Jump on board, get this out to everybody you can, and let's get busy getting busy. And I swear to God, if you join us, we'll win. We'll win. You're going to let the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution go to Don the Con Rico Pedo Pig with 5-time Bow Spurs and 6-time bankruptcies and all of the stuff that he's in the middle of, and all of these horrible guys like Grinder Mike Johnson and, you know, the Liars for the Lord and all the rest of these goons running our country? No, I know you're not. You just didn't know this existed. Now you do. Spread the word. Onwards and upwards.